Moscow insists it's still interested in pursuing peace talks. That's not how Ukraine and its allies see it, though. After the second biggest barrage on the capital since the full-scale invasion of 2022. At least 19 killed overnight with drones and ballistic missiles hitting more than 20 locations, including the city center. Azerbaijan's embassy, the European Union and British Council buildings, they were among those hit. Emerald Maxwell has more.
Shell-shocked residents find comfort where they can as rescue workers pick through the rubble of their apartment building. Russian strikes hit Kyiv as the city slept. It was the second deadliest wartime assault on Ukraine's capital.
I heard a loud explosion which hit the neighbouring flat. Then a door fell on me. The entire flat was destroyed, as were our cars.
Honestly, this has never happened before, that they attacked so close to me. In any case, everyone is suffering now. It's everywhere.
According to the Ukrainian army, Russia struck around 20 targets in Kyiv overnight, with hypersonic ballistic missiles and around 600 drones. President Zelensky accused Russia of choosing arms over negotiations, as it still does not fear any consequences. Outrage also after the overnight barrage damaged the headquarters of the European Union mission in Kyiv and the British Council. London and Brussels have summoned their Russian envoys, and the EU said it would soon put forward another round of sanctions.
This was the deadliest drone and missile attack on the capital since July. And it was an attack also on our delegation. I just spoke with our deputy ambassador, and I'm relieved that none of our staff were harmed.
The British Prime Minister accused the Russian president of sabotaging hopes of peace with the strikes. Since Vladimir Putin met Donald Trump in Alaska on August 15th, there's been no let-up of Moscow's assault. Thursday, the Kremlin said Russia is still interested in peace, but will keep up strikes. This Friday, Ukrainian representatives are set to meet members of the Trump administration in New York, but Russia won't be at the table.
And for more, let's cross now to Berlin and correspondent Nick Holdsworth. Nick, let's begin with what's still unfolding in Kyiv, what with the rescue workers still digging through the rubble at this hour.
Yes, indeed. This has been just one of the worst strikes the Ukrainian capital has seen. I know the city centre well. I've spent time in Kyiv since the war started, and I was always careful to choose a place to stay in the city centre because that was considered safe, because embassies are there, the EU representation is there, the British Council is there, and we've just seen those two buildings hit in this overnight strike in an area with no apparent military targets in it, and of course in other parts of the capital where residential buildings were hit and people have died. So, I mean, this really is a shocking attack as the West and President Trump try to nudge Vladimir Putin closer to peace negotiations. This just somehow shows some contempt for that. It is indeed, as the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has tweeted today, it shows the true face of Russia. He said this testifies to the growing ruthlessness of the Russian regime, and his foreign minister has said that these attacks cannot remain without consequences. He refused to define exactly what they may be, but he said that Germany is considering, along with its EU partners, further consequences which we can expect to mean a further tightening of sanctions, perhaps a fresh look at what to do with those frozen Russian assets, billions of euros worth of frozen Russian assets. Currently, the interest on those being used to support Ukraine, but governments in the EU have been a bit leery of approaching actually using the capital. Perhaps this may push the clock forward a little bit on that question, which Ukraine has been pushing on for the past 3.5 years.
What's the message being sent by Moscow?
I think Moscow is sending the message that it has maximus demands and that any peace deal is going to have to address them, because otherwise it's just going to continue fighting. It shows that Russia believes it's winning this war. Russia has been making incremental advances in recent weeks. It claimed just a few days ago to have taken 3 more villages, pretty much no more than ruins now, of course. Ukraine pushes back, saying it's retaken 1 or 2 small places on the front line. But Russia thinks it can win, and thinks that by showing strength, it will strengthen its hand in any eventual consequences. Of course, Vladimir Putin's red lines are that he wants to keep what Russia has taken. He wants more than that. He wants the entire 4 eastern provinces, including the Donetsk region, which Russia only has about 75% of. And of course, Kyiv and Volodymyr Zelensky are very firm. They won't give up any further land to Russia in any peace deal. So, otherwise, why they've been fighting so hard for the last 3.5 years and lost so many men. But this just shows how uncompromising Russia really is, and how much the Kremlin believes in its armed forces. And to a certain extent, this shows that it believes the West is weak, that it can get away with such actions with impunity. And unless Western leaders really understand the thinking in the Kremlin is going to continue doing this.
Well, joining our discussion now is Jeanette Süß, research fellow at the study on the Franco-German Relations. Thank you from the French political think tank IFRI. Thank you for being with us from here in Paris. And joining us from Birmingham in the UK, Stefan Wolff, Professor of International Security at the University of Birmingham. Let me begin with you, Stefan. Do you agree with Nick Holdsworth, our former Moscow correspondent, is saying there about the intentions of Moscow?
Absolutely. I think it's very clear that Russia thinks that this war is still winnable for Moscow on the battlefield. And sadly, they are demonstrating the kind of success that we haven't seen for quite some time. And that, as your Berlin correspondent just emphasized, also is an indication that the Western strategy actually is not working. Ukraine now lacks essential air defenses, and it is under massive pressure along the front lines, in particular in the eastern part of the country.
And so right now, as we speak, there was one of these regular monthly meetings of foreign and defense ministers convened for Copenhagen in Denmark, which holds the rotating presidency of the European Council. What can the EU do?
I think that's really a big question. What we will probably see is another sanctions package. There will, in all likelihood, be a move, I think, now on the Russian assets. But the fundamental problem that Europe still has is that it doesn't have the defense industrial capacity to support Ukraine with more ammunition, with more weapons. The opening now of a new arms factory in Germany, I think that's a very positive step. But that will take some time before it actually reaches full capacity and can supply Ukraine at a level that the country really needs to withstand the Russian assault.
Yeah, Jeanette Süß, this is billed as the biggest munitions factory in Europe that is being unveiled this Wednesday. Later, and we'll talk about it more, there's going to be this Franco-German summit dinner at the presidential summer retreat on the Riviera at the Fort de Brégançon. And there we have a situation where there's that old chestnut when it comes to European defense of building, and we seem to have lost the connection with Jeanette Süß, but we'll try to reconnect immediately. Apologies for that. The building of a Franco-German airplane, along with the Spanish known as FCAS. Of course, that's, as was just said by Stefan Wolff in Birmingham, Nick Holdsworth, is years down the line. What's the reaction where you are today to these latest overnight strikes and to what Germany should do about it?
Well, of course, we've seen the opening of the Rheinmetall new artillery shell production line just yesterday. You had a NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte there, along with the German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius and various other dignitaries, looking at that factory, which is going to have a staff of about 500, produce 25,000 artillery shells next year, and work up towards 350,000 artillery shells within a couple of years, which will go a long way to fulfilling Kyiv's needs. Of course, there's also this talk of increasing the size of the German standing army, the Bundeswehr. Currently 180,000 strong. Friedrich Merz wants that to be at least 260,000 with 200,000 reserves. No plans for conscription yet, but what they are going to do is force any men of 18 and over to answer a questionnaire on whether they would be willing to serve in the armed forces. And for women, that would be a voluntary questionnaire. And those who say yes, they will start a process of looking into whether they're good enough to be recruited, fit enough, suitable to serve in the army. If this doesn't fill the ranks, conscription could be back on the agenda within a couple of years. Germany last used a conscript army up until 2011.
And that was a point mentioned on Wednesday by the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who made the trip to Moldova along with the leaders of Poland and France. All right, we'll try to get that clip of the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz for you, who spoke on Wednesday, again, on that trip to Moldova that he made with Emmanuel Macron and Donald Tusk.
We're now really approaching this task with the declared target of having 260,000 soldiers in Germany. And we want to achieve this target. My goal is that Germany, due to its size and economic strength, is the country that must have the strongest conventional army in NATO on the European side.
All right, we don't know if it was gremlins to blame, but we do have the connection back, both with Stefan Wolff and Jeanette Süß. Thanks for being with us. Apologies for that technical snafu. Jeanette, let me ask you, how much of a revolution is it for Germany, this recruitment drive for soldiers?
Actually, the compulsory military service has never really been got rid of. Actually, it was just suspended. So, although it is true that, of course, Germany is a very pacifist country, it has long been on the agenda, this discussion whether we need more soldiers. So from 2024 to 2025, we've already seen a rise of around 28% actually in the soldiers, but it's not enough. That's what military experts say along the bank. So of course, there's going to be a need for an increase. However, the big question is whether a voluntary call for more soldiers within the German Bundeswehr might be enough. A lot of the military experts doubt that.
And as Nick Holdsworth was saying, there's pushback even within the ruling coalition in Germany.
Absolutely, because although the three-party coalition that we had before, the so-called Ampel coalition, is over, there's still the SPD, the Social Democrats, composing a part of the government, and especially also having the defense ministry, holding the defense ministry with Boris Pistorius. And there is still a very pacifist branch within the Social Democrats. So Friedrich Merz can't call the shots by himself. He has to deal with its coalition partner and has to take into account these concerns by his coalition partner, but also by the broader population, of course.
Stefan Wolff, tell us your take on German public opinion. I mean, we know that there are those who are pushing back against support for Ukraine. I don't know what it's like on a day like today. And it's not only coming, as we're just saying, from the far-right AfD.
No, absolutely. I mean, there is, as Jeanette just said, a very strong pacifist tradition in the SPD, but also a very strong tradition within the SPD still that actually goes back to the Ostpolitik days of Willy Brandt, that really wants to make accommodations with countries in the East, including with Russia. So I don't think we'll necessarily get past that, but I also don't think that this is the mainstream opinion in Germany. The problem is not so much that German public opinion doesn't necessarily see that Russia is a problem, that Russia is a threat, certainly Russia under Putin in 2025. The problem is that the necessary sacrifices that come with actually doing something about this threat, that is not something that I think a vast majority of the German public is prepared to live up to. So whether that's conscription, whether that's potentially higher taxes to invest in defense industrial capacity, whether it's basically a new arms race against Russia, I think all of that are the stumbling blocks. And here, what we really need is leadership from the Chancellor, from his coalition partners, but also leadership at the European level more broadly.
And the Germans who are reluctant to spend a lot more, of course, Jeanette Süß, you know the latest news here in France, where the Prime Minister has made it a choice between an austerity budget and his government falling, and it seems as though Parliament is about to choose the latter. So where's the money going to come from for more defense?
Yeah, that's a very good question for France, but also for Germany, of course. I mean, France was very enlightened to see the reshuffle of the deficit and of the debt policy of Germany with the investment fund that has been brought about, which is quite an exception, especially for CDU, which is rather tend to stick to austerity politics. But here we also can see the spat within the government between the Social Democrats and the CDU, whether it is going to be at the expenses of social policy. And the same discourse we have in France, François Bayrou calling into question, for example, holidays that we should erase, we should get rid of, or other restrictions on the social benefit system, reform of the health insurance, of the unemployment insurance, so on and so forth. So whether we can maintain actually the current state of our healthcare, of our wealth actually, and our health system, that's a good question for both of the countries actually.
So Nick Holdsworth, at the heart of the European Union, is what's known, and it's an overused cliche, the Franco-German motor that's at the heart of it. That Franco-German motor, we're about to have a photo op display of it, first with this dinner this Thursday evening between the French president and the German chancellor, followed Friday by these mostly ceremonial joint cabinet meetings. Now, should be said, the last time there was a Franco-German joint cabinet meeting, shortly thereafter, Emmanuel Macron called snap elections, which he lost. So how does that bode?
Yeah, that's really a problem, of course, because we were just about to get to roadmap with concrete measures back in the day, and then there was the elections coming up. This time, I think it's a bit different because Macron didn't mention to do another election round this time, so there might be a government reshuffle, which of course impedes then the implementation of potential measures that might be decided by tomorrow by the Council of Ministers, the Franco-German Council of Ministers, which is actually the 25th time of its case. It's a very particular thing between France and Germany. But yeah, of course, we need the ministers on board to carry out the measures that are going to be proposed.
Nick Holdsworth in Berlin, there was not great chemistry between Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron. We'd just gotten to this point where the press was saying how, Macron and Merz get along much better. And now ahead is all this political turmoil here in France. How's that going down where you are?
Well, I think that Merz is seen as a much more capable European leader than Olaf Scholz was. I mean, Scholz was Chancellor for a relatively short period of time. Merz perhaps is still enjoying some of that incoming wind that any new Chancellor gets, but he certainly has a different approach. And it's clear that so far he and Macron do get on well together, and that Merz really is sort of holding up the tent pole in the centre of Europe. I mean, just turning back for a moment to the whole idea about expanding the army. I mean, for the last 80 years, the idea of an expanded German army has been anathema, not just here, but across Europe because of the history of this country. And now that is really not so controversial. Some people in this country may not like the idea of an expanded army, but expanding it is necessary. And let's just recall that if the German standing army is 160,000 at the moment, that's the size of the force with which Vladimir Putin attacked Ukraine just 3.5 years ago, and they had plenty of troops in reserve. As for the relations going forward, I mean, of course, there are some tricky details. I think that Macron and Merz are pretty much on the same page when it comes to Ukraine. Macron has spoken about French boots on the ground in Ukraine as some kind of a peacekeeping force after any eventual peace negotiations. The Germans are a little bit more reluctant on that score. There is some friction over the FCAS, the Future Combat Air System, jet fighters, with Germany's Airbus feeling a bit disgruntled that they didn't get a part of that deal. But generally speaking, I think that on economic and military issues of security issues of supporting Ukraine and opposing Russia, the two big motors of Europe are on the same page. And Merz is going into a meeting tonight, hopefully with Macron under sunnier skies than we're enjoying in Berlin tonight, to push that. And I think that Macron actually enjoys that kind of support from Merz, because Macron really is in a bit of political trouble at home, of course.
It's an interesting sequence, Stefan Wolff, with this Wednesday display of support for former Soviet state Moldova, where we saw Merz, Macron, and Donald Tusk of Poland pitching up. But there's still, again, all the nagging issues we've talked about how unprepared Europe is for strategic autonomy, as Emmanuel Macron puts it, and especially in the case of Germany, where its military hardware, it comes from the United States, which still has thousands of troops on German soil.
Absolutely. I think that's a real problem that Germany and France both have here at the moment. But we also shouldn't forget that, what really drives forward European defense at the moment is this so-called coalition of the willing. And that crucially includes non-European member states of NATO, in particular Canada, of course, but also NATO member states that are not part of the EU. I'm particularly thinking here, of course, the United Kingdom, but also countries like Norway, for example. So I think it's absolutely right to say that sort of European, the European effort in that is very much a Franco-German axis now. But even France and Germany, as the two largest economies in the EU, cannot manage that by themselves. They need reliance on other partners in the geographical space of Europe and across the Atlantic.
And how much attention should people pay to the photo ops like the one we're about to see on the French Riviera?
Well, I think they are very important because, symbolically, that really matters to get this message across that actually Europe stands together. And at the heart of Europe standing together is, again, or still, a very strong French-German alliance. So I think from that perspective, we really shouldn't underestimate that. But as was said earlier in this conversation, also substance in the end really matters. So it's not just people standing together on a stage, shaking hands, smiling. It's also what they actually agree and then how quickly and how decisively they implement it.
Stefan Wolff in Birmingham, Jeanette Süß in Paris, and correspondent Nick Holdsworth in Berlin. Thank you so much for being with us.